incorporate tables in your UI. Now, tables are very useful because you want to organize how your data is displayed on your UI. So I created a class, I called it tables, extending JFrame. Now it doesn't have anything except the main method, and we will do everything with the help of the designer because it's going to make our life easier. So I'll open up my designer. Now this is my frame. I will go to my frame and set it to absolute layout to be able to place my elements or components anywhere I want. Now I'll go ahead and get a table. I'll pull it about this size. So you want to keep holding your mouse while you're extending the table. If you just place it, it's going to be so tiny it's not going to be visible. So I'll place it somewhere here which looks like the middle to me. And I'll go back to my source code. Now I'll create a frame here, so JFrame, and I'm gonna call it frame. I will define everything in my constructor. So I'll come right here and I'll say frame is equal to new JFrame, and I will give it a name in a moment. So my intention with this table is to have course numbers with course names. So I will just call my frame courses. And this is going to give me a frame called courses. Now let me give it a size. So frame.set size. And for my size, let me say 800. I believe by 700 will do. Okay. So if we look right here, Eclipse created the table for us. Now I need one more thing to be able to put data in the table, which is defining the data for the table. Now my advice is always define the data after the table initialization, because sometimes if you define the data above the table, by default we tend to assign it to the table, which is going to give you an exception. So I always like to put my data in like below the table definition, because as we know, Java is going to read the code from top to bottom. So for the table, I will need to supply it with data in a form of an array. Now, will I be able to provide an array right away to my table? The answer is no. We will need to create what we call a default table model, which is going to be the way we supply data to the table. Now, for the default table model, it's going to require us to have two arrays, one of them being a two-dimensional array. So let's create those arrays, and you will see what the arrays are as we go. Now, the first array is going to be holding the titles of the columns of the table. So it's going to be a one-dimensional array, and it's of type string, and let me call it call names. This is going to have my column names for my table. So for this being a table of courses, and I want it to be simple, so I'll have just two columns, namely course number, and the other column is going to be called course name. Now the second array needs to be of type object, and this needs to be a multi-dimensional array, and this is going to have my courses. Now why do I need to have it as a multi-dimensional array? Let's see how we define the data in it, and then this will make it obvious. So if I want my first row of my table to have CS 1400, just like this, CS 1400, and then what is the name for that course? It is going to be Fundamentals of Programming. Now if you look closely, this is the first column name, this is the second column name. Now this is the data in the first column, this is the data in the second column. Now this is an array which is going to be used for a column. So we can safely say now this is a row of data. Now to have my other row, what I need to do is to have another subarray. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, my other row is going to have CS 1410, and this is going to be called Object Oriented Programming. Okay, now let's just add one more. Let's say it is called I'm gonna make this up. So math 1101. I don't know if that's a real course number. And then I will say algebra, for example, algebra 1, or any course name. Okay, now I created my data. As I said, we cannot supply this to the table right away. We need to create what's called a default table model, which is going to be the data model for our table. So I will say default table model, and since it's going just to have data, so I'll say data. Now it's going to give me an error because I need to import it. So I will import this line, import javax.swing.table.default table model. Now I need to create a new default table model. But this is going to require some arguments. Now the arguments are going to be the object multidimensional array, which is courses, followed by the other array, which is call names. Okay, now I'll leave this intentionally like this. I'm going to leave this whole thing missing two things, and we will see what's going to happen if we don't include them. First of all, I'll just say frame.get content pane.set layout, and then here it's frame dot, because these two lines are auto generated by Eclipse. Now I need to make sure my frame is visible, so frame.set visible to true, and then I will just do this to be able to close it easily. So frame.set default close operation to jframe dot exit on close. Okay, now I need one more thing to be able to see my project workings, which is tables t is equal to new tables, and let's save this and run it. Now you will see that I have my table, but I don't have any data in my table. Didn't we create the data? Yes, we did. Didn't we create the data, the default table model? Yes, we did. But we never said that this data belongs to this specific table. Because keep in mind that you can have multiple tables in the same UI. Those tables can have multiple or different data. So I need to set this data as the source of the data for the table. So I'll come anywhere right here. I can just come right after we created this. I'll say table.set model, and then I will provide it with the data that I just set, that I just created. Let's save this and run it. And now I can see my data, but do you notice something missing? Didn't we create column names, but the column names are not visible in here? The reason is, if we want to see the column names, we will need to surround the table by what we call a JScroll pane. So I'll close this and I'll go back to my design. Now you can write this in code, but you can always do this. Right click, surround with JScroll pane. And now if I run this, I will be able to see my column names, course number and course name. Now you can always write this in code, because if we go back to the code, we just created a new scroll pane, and then we added the scroll pane instead of adding the table. and we add the table to the scroll pane. So what we had is we added the table to the scroll pane, and we added the scroll pane. Previously we had add table right here without a scroll pane. Now what we have is a frame, and the frame is having the scroll pane, and inside the scroll pane we have the table, and this is allowing us to have the following table. Now you can always go back to the design and see if you want borders or not to be displayed in your table. You just click on the component right here, which is the table, and you can come here and set your borders and set everything.